I know that privacy always comes up. People always talk about it. But I guess I keep going back to my same point, which was I don't see people like with pitchforks and the torches going down to complain to Jeff Bezos that Amazon's collecting massive amounts of data, or T-Mobile and Sprint and all these are mapping our locations as we move around. I just don't see it. I mean, that probably raised nobody's interest for the most part. That article that you just pulled up, and I guess in part it's because we become kind of used to it, become accustomed to it. So fine, but. What should we be worried about? Well, I tell you what we should be worried about mostly is state-sponsored activity by countries whose interests almost never align with ours. Now, it would include China. It certainly includes Russia, includes Iran. The shit that they're doing. China has a policy, information domination, right? Which means they've determined that the next war, the next modern large-scale war is going to be won by whoever has control over information. So where are they putting all their resources? China knows that they're not going to build a military that's going to be able to reach around the globe for the most part, although they're beefing up their resources. What are they doing? It's cyber and it's space, right? So I know a lot of people were kicking the president in the ass and laughing about the Space Force because it is funny, right? But the uniforms would be amazing. But they talk about this, but China honestly believes, and is putting their resources into cyber and to space. And what does that mean? Well, if their anti-satellite technology that they've been developing and working on and continue to work on, the whole point of that is to take control of communications and surveillance abilities, whether it's ours or our allies, in the event of something major that happens.
So they would have the ability to shut off our satellites?
Yeah. And if you do that, then what does that mean? Well, it means you're blind, right? And we're all suddenly walking around with compasses and maps, trying to shoot an azimuth and figure out where the hell, the target is.
So China is currently developing that, or they have developed something that disrupts
They're working
satellites?
on it now. Yeah, they're working on it now. They developed some of it. They're working to get the next generation. It's like every nation that has the resources and ability understands that and is doing the same. It's not like we're not.
Right. What is their excuse?
They don't have an excuse. They understand. They have the right to do it. I mean, it's not like they.
Right. As long as they don't use it in an illegal way, they have the right to develop the tech. It's like
there's no treaty that says you can't develop anti-satellite technology, right? There's the START treaties, there's the nuclear conventions that we have with Russia, which is a whole other interesting topic because we're right now arguing with the Russians over the latest nuke agreement that took place some time ago. It's coming up for renewal sometime soon, a year or 2 years from now, and the Russians have been cheating on a previous agreement, and so we're, now they're trying to say we're cheating on the new one, and so that's an interesting thing to be watching. But the point being is that there's conventions that try to control the numbers for warheads or for delivery mechanisms, missiles or submarines or whatever, bombers, but not for this new world, cyberspace. The Pentagon's still trying to figure out what a war means in cyberspace.
Right.
How do you respond? What's the threshold? And then what's an appropriate response? And so maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll start having these discussions and create treaties that will allow that. But right now, from China's perspective, again, not to beat on China, but I'm much more concerned about China for our national security. They're a much bigger concern than Russia is. Russia's punching above its weight. And Putin's a dick, no doubt about it, right? And they're doing what they always do, which is meddle in democracy. That's been their methodology ever since they've been around.
Yeah.
But that's small potatoes. They've got the GDP of a small European country, and when the oil prices, are in the toilet, they really are sucking wind. So, yeah, we got to be concerned with Russia and understand that their interests are never aligned with ours, for the most part. Maybe we tried to imagine they were with Syria and ISIS and everything. But Russia's only interest there was maintaining their leverage and increasing it and not losing their military foothold there. That was their primary interest. We mirror our values and we mirror our interests on other countries. And so we imagined that somehow we were all in this fight against ISIS together. Horseshit. So yeah, China's a much bigger issue, and we should be focused on that. And to some degree, this administration is. So that's where I say, look, you can't just keep complaining and bitching and moaning because you don't like President Trump. There's certain things that are going on that you should be willing to say, that makes sense. Maybe I don't like the messenger, but that part of it makes sense.
Is it his personal? I mean, was it because of his dealings with China from the business world that he understands it better, or that he's more concerned with the imbalance of the trade?
I think what happened was, what do I know? This is speculation. So, hey, but I suspect that what happened was he came into it focused on the trade imbalance, right? And as he was sitting there and talking about the trade imbalance, more of the conversation from the National Security Council and from the agency and others in terms of saying, well, yeah, this is part of the reason why, and this is the long-term effects of their theft of intellectual property. This is why, in part, they've been successful in these areas. So I think there was probably more and more discussion talking about their economic espionage and theft of IP, and that became then an issue for him. But I think initially, and still to this day, I think the big issue is just he wants to try to create a win in terms of the trade imbalance.
Russia seems to us here domestically, speaking for myself, when I think about it and I think about the narrative that's been sort of delivered to us, is that Russia is this military danger. We're worried about Putin taking over other countries. We're worried about Putin's power, the way he kills dissidents, the way he kills political opponents and journalists. We think about China, and even with the Huawei arrests, we're like, no one seems to be concerned. It doesn't seem to light any bulbs over here.
Yeah. No, you're right. I don't know why that is, except, Putin's more like a thug.
He's a visual.
Right. Right. And also, I mean, look, he's been very clear about, wanting to try to rebuild the Soviet Union. So whether it's Crimea and the annexation of that, or whether taking over eastern Ukraine, or maintaining a position in Georgia, whatever it is, he, certainly, his attacks or the FSB's attacks overseas against, dissidents and others. He's just more in your face. He's like Tony Soprano, right? And so you can look at that. China's always been, sort of this thing, right? And look, China's fantastic. The history is amazing. The places are incredible. I think it's, we should be trading with China. We should be doing a huge amount of business with China. We should, clear the decks and try to the degree we can level the playing field. But we should also be pragmatic and realize what they do, in terms of their theft of IP. And so, because that probably won't change. But yeah, we absolutely should be dealing with China all the time. But I think that they've always kind of been viewed more in more of a sophisticated fashion, maybe, because Putin is just sort of in your face. And he's good at it. He's very successful. He's a smart son of a bitch. But I think he's pretty easy to read, right? He's thuggish, and he longs for those days of the Soviet Union. So we should understand that everything he does is because of that. It's because he would love to rebuild the Soviet Union. And so we shouldn't be surprised by any sort of aggressive move that he makes against his neighbors, and we should always push back. And to be fair, this administration, not to beat their drum, but the actions they've taken against Russia, despite the fact that you've got people calling him a puppet of Putin, are more significant than the previous administration took.
Like, what has he done?
The sanctions against key individuals and companies within Russia, as an example. Those are the toughest sanctions have been placed on Russia ever. The provision of weapons and assistance to the Ukrainians, right? That was something the previous administration said, no, not going to do that, because we don't want any blowback. That's a good thing, right? That should be done. Pushing back against them on the 2011 nuke deal. Right, on the previous, on the START deal prior to the 2011 deal, and calling them out and saying, look, you're cheating on this, and you got to be held accountable. I mean, there's certain things there that make sense, and that don't add up. If you talk to somebody who says, well, he's an absolute puppet, and you say, well, okay, he's a puppet, so why is he doing certain things that seem counter to Russian interests? And they'll say, well, because he's smart, and he's like, he doesn't want to get caught out. Right. See, he's playing a long game here, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe who knows, but I haven't strapped on my tinfoil hat yet to get to that point, so I don't know.
Yeah, that seems like a complicated one if they have some compromising information about him. That was always the fear, right? Is that they knew something, or
Yeah.
maybe it was business dealings, maybe it was people peeing on them, or
Yeah.
something
Look,
like that.
if they did, and again, anything, fucking hell, in today's world, anything's possible, right?
Right.
And I wish we had somebody else in there who was more elegant and eloquent and sophisticated. And
Does anybody stand out to you?
Not right now. No.